Welcome everyone to another session of TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we are going to be taking a look at min and max basics with the inventory portion of the AIM software. I have done a couple of other webinars on this, so if you have seen me give this presentation at a trade show or a convention, or if you've checked that webinar out, this may be old news for you, but feel free to stick around in case you'd like a refresher, because in my opinion, you can't hear this kind of information enough. So what we're going to be looking at specifically today is how the minimum and maximum quantities on your SKUs can be manipulated automatically by the program based on how well those SKUs are selling. And you are fully in control of how this works. So today we're going to take a look at the tools that you can use to make it work the way that you want it and that you need it to work. As always, we're using GoToWebinar. Well, not as always, but for the time being, as we have been, we're using GoToWebinar. And you have a questions panel in that GoToWebinar toolbar. So at any point, if you have a question, definitely let me know in that question box, and we will make sure that we get your questions answered. I will see those as they come in, and I'll do my best to answer them accordingly. Also, with that GoToWebinar toolbar, if it is in the way and you're having a hard time seeing what I am covering, there is a little button on there. It looks like a little orange button with a white arrow. You can click on that, and that will compress it down and get it out of the way. You can always click on that again to bring it back up. So that way you can bring up the panel when you need it. You can close it away when you don't, and we can stay focused on the topic and the content. Now, as I've been doing in the current series of webinars I've been doing, I'm using a music database for my content. If you are not a music store, don't tune away, because the concepts stay the same no matter if you are a golf course pro shop, or if you are a hobby store, or if you're a vacuum and sewing dealer, or if you are a novelties and consignment, whatever it might be, the content is still technically the same. So without further ado, let's talk about what mins and maxes are and how you can tweak them to your needs. So any given SKU you have in your system, I'm just going to go ahead and bring up my go-to SKU in every system I use, and that is good old RT14. In the system, it is valve oil. In your system, it might be chain oil or whatever it might be. But basically, at every location for that SKU, there is a minimum quantity and a maximum quantity. And the idea with that is when your quantity that you have available to sell at that location drops below the minimum quantity, the software can recommend to place a stock order to bring you back up to that maximum quantity. Now, you can technically set these values yourself at any given point. You can go in right in here into this change inventory screen, set the min and max quantity for what you want it to be, and your reorder reports will always reflect that then as you go forward. But you can also have the system manipulate what those quantities are based on how well or how poorly this item is selling. In my example here, I currently have a quantity of 26. Now, that's technically a quantity on hand. The quantity available to sell may be different. In this case, it's not. You can see if I bring up this details screen, which I did by clicking this details button, it's showing me my quantity on hand and my quantity available. Now, the difference between the two could be that maybe some of this quantity is allocated for special orders. Maybe some of it is out, and by out, it's allocated for something else. It's on layaway, it's reserved for repair and service, it's on a shorter long-term rental, it's on approval. You can press F6 in that field, and it will bring you up a snapshot of all the different ways in which it can be out. If the quantity out is 0 and the quantity available is still less than the quantity on hand, you can press F6 while you're in that field, and it will bring up who might have special orders for this item. But regardless of those details, specifically when it comes to that reorder value, it's looking at the quantity available, because the quantity on hand is technically what you own. And you might own 100 of these, but if they're all out or allocated in some way, we don't want to have it reflecting on, oh, you should have 100 of these, even though you really don't have them underneath your roof, if that makes sense. In fact, you can see here that with that quantity available and the minimum quantity of 40, that quantity is less than that, meaning that it would want to order at any given point right now 34 of those. 26 plus 34 brings me up to 60. So that's kind of the snapshot of how mins and maxes work. But like I was saying, we can go one step further. AIM can analyze the sales performance of these items, and it can come up with basically an algorithm, or use an algorithm to come up with a number that I like to call the average daily sale. With that average daily sale, it can figure out about how many of these you sell any given day, and then it can calculate how many you should have, minimum and maximum, based on some variables that you put in at the subcategory level. Let's take a look at that. Let's close out of change and inventory. We're going to go back to the main menu. We're going to go into maintenance, inventory, and maintain subcategories. Here in maintain subcategories, for every category, regardless of which one it is, there's an inventory management tab. And on that inventory management tab, you have some settings that you can tweak to tell the system how you want it to impact the min-max calculation. Let's take a look at what these numbers mean. So the first field here, you can see it says days of history to go back for min-max. So now the default value for this is 180 days, 6 months of sales history from the current day backwards. Basically, what it would do is for every SKU in this category and subcategory, it'll go back and it'll look at daily sales, and it'll come up with that average daily sale. Maybe it is 1 if you sell one on average every day. So in other words, if over the course of 180 days, you sold one, on average 101 for every 180 days. Now that might be 2 the first day, 0 the next day, 0 the third day, 4 the third day, but over the course of that average, it came out to 1. Maybe it's less than 1. Maybe it comes out to 0.8 or 0.6 or 0.4. So you're not selling on 1 every day, but maybe you're selling 1 every other day, 1 every third day, 2 every 3 days, something like that. That's kind of the idea with that. Regardless of what the number is, it's going to take that and multiply it against these next 2 values at the subcategory level, and that is the number of days of stock for minimum and stock for maximum. The default values in these 2 fields are 30 and 60, as you can see. So the idea with this is if you order on average about once a month for products in this category, it's going to order enough to get you through at least 1 month, but no more than 2. Let me know if that makes sense or not. If you have any questions, well, because this is a key element to how this works. So basically, getting back to my example, if it came out to calculating about 1 a day for every day, then my minimum would be 1 times 30 is 30. And my maximum quantity for that SKU would be 1 times 60 is 60. If it came out to every other day, or 0.5, then my minimum for that SKU, 0.5 times 30, would be 15. And my maximum for that SKU, 0.5 times 60, would be 30. Hopefully you're getting that, because again, that's kind of critical to how this works. Now, you can certainly set these numbers, and in fact, it's encouraged to come in and analyze these numbers, because let's say you order more frequently than once a month for any given products in this category. The idea with that is you can reduce these numbers. Let's say that for my band category items, maybe I order more than once a month. Maybe I order every 2 weeks or so. I could put in 14 and 28. So I would still have enough stock to get me through 2 weeks, but I would be capping out after 4 weeks or 28 days. That's kind of the idea with that. If you order more frequently than that, maybe you order once a week. Maybe you might have 7 and 14. I'm kind of using just twice the amount of time that it takes for me on the average of when I place those orders. Something to also kind of keep in mind could be how long on average the vendors for these types of products take to ship you those products once you've placed the order. If they have a pretty quick turnaround time, you may be able to reduce these numbers overall. So maybe you want to have, let's say, 4 days and 14 days. You still want to order enough to get you through 2 weeks, but you can shorten that window in which you're needing to place the order. Or the opposite way, maybe you want to place the order earlier, but then reduce the overall amount of inventory that you might be ordering. So maybe you leave this at 7 and make this be 10. So kind of whatever you feel is going to work best for you. The overall idea is that the sales performance doesn't change. You're still selling one every day or one every other day. How much stock do you want to keep? How much room do you have to allocate for inventory in your warehouse, on your sales floors? The concept of this process is trying to reach what is known as just-in-time inventory. With just-in-time inventory, you're not keeping an overabundance of stock in the hopes that you will sell that inventory, which is known as just-in-case inventory. With just-in-time inventory, you're basically ordering and you're getting to a place where your inventory is constantly cycling. It's not spending a whole lot of time sitting in your warehouse collecting dust in the hopes that it will sell. Basically, it will move through your inventory, and the idea of this is to reduce the inventory turn time and increase the overall number of inventory turns, period, thus making this a more liquid process. This has the simultaneous impact of reducing the amount of money you are potentially spending on your inventory. Because what you're doing is you're spending the money on the products that are cycling, that are moving. If it takes longer for something to sell, automatically by using this process, it will reduce the amount that it's actually putting in the min and max quantities for those inventories because you're not selling as many. If you only sell one every 5th day and you have a basic average daily sale of 0.2 times these numbers are pretty low. So you're still going to sell what you're selling, but it'll just ask you to order more of it and it will wait longer for you to place that restocking order. Hopefully that is making sense. I do see some questions coming in. Jennifer is asking, so you can't look by specific dates like May and June, only over the past 3 years of history. We'll talk about that in a second, Jennifer, but excellent question. And then Brandy is saying, I'm not clear on the math on how much time to give to the max category. So let me see if I can't elaborate a little bit more on that, Brandy. Honestly, basically the max is just how much inventory you want to keep in your store overall. And I'm just kind of using these numbers as examples, but basically the more frequently you reorder, the lower you can afford these numbers to be. There's really no scientific principle or e-commerce law or anything like that I'm using to come up with these numbers. This is just what I've seen work in the industries and what I've heard works for AIM users. So basically, these numbers can be whatever you want them to be. Getting back to this number, this is basically the only number that can overall impact that average daily sale number. Because if you think about the law of statistics, the greater of a time span you are taking into consideration for determining your average, the flatter that line's going to be, the more stable it's going to be. In other words, if your sales spike 1 month out of those 6 months, it's not too big of a deal. It's going to be a flatter curve. However, if your sales were to spike in, let's say, the 3rd month, and you reduce this number of days of history to, let's say, 120 or 90, basically a shorter window, then that would have the impact of making this be a more volatile number. So basically, it's a smaller window and it won't be as flat of a curve. By comparison to that, then, if you've got products that honestly do take a long time to move, let's say you are selling grand pianos or large product price points, basically, very expensive products that are kind of for specific types of customers that only come around every so often. You could put in a longer window. You could say maybe 210 or 250 days. So I'm kind of using month processes here to kind of take longer snapshots into consideration. So that's kind of the idea with that. You can manipulate this at the subcategory level. So that's basically how you control the math of what it's going to use to calculate these numbers. So hopefully that makes sense there. Jennifer is kind of following up. It doesn't really work for seasonal items like marching band season. Most of the year we sell none. I will talk a little bit about ways that you can take that into consideration here, Jennifer, again in just a moment. Tim is asking also, how can you best deal with seasonal sales? We sell a lot of products the first few months of the year and then the needs level off. Let's talk about how these numbers actually change throughout the course of your year. So again, hopefully these numbers make sense. If there are still any more questions on where that's coming from, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to show you where you go to have it recalculate these numbers. So if you recall, I'm going to leave that as is. If you recall, we had a min and max of 40 and 60 for my SKU of RT14. Now back in your inventory module, there is a submenu called Inventory Management. And in this Inventory Management menu is where we have all the different ways of recalculating mins and maxes. The most basic one is establish and reset min max. Now by default, this does 180 days, 150 days, 210 days, whatever that is for that individual subcategory, and it will go ahead and just run this for all of your inventory. You can run this for specific categories and subcategories. You can run this for certain locations if you'd like. You can also technically manipulate the date range in which that period is being analyzed. So you could either exclude a certain date range up here. You'll see there's a spot up here where you can say date range to exclude. So in that 180 days, if there's, let's say, a 2-week window, or maybe, what week are we here in this pandemic? A 4 or 5 week window that you kind of want to exclude from that calculation because there are inconsistencies in the data. Say, for example, if your store was forced closed because of a snowstorm or things like that. If you want to exclude those dates because they're abnormalities, you could certainly do so. If you'd like to just override the date range entirely, then this is what the override date range is for that function. So getting back to Jennifer's question of, is there a way to look at specific dates like May and June, then you could definitely use this function to do that, to do just that. But let's go ahead. I'm just going to go ahead and proceed with this. I don't have a whole heck of a lot of data in here. And all of my categories and subcategories are set to that 180-day, 30, and 60-day window. And basically what this is going to do is this is going to come up with a snapshot of all my SKUs that it's coming up with here. I did run it for both locations. I don't have any sales at my Iowa City location, so you can kind of ignore these I columns. In fact, let's just do this. I'm just going to focus on the D columns here, the D location items. And basically, for each item, it's going to show me what the old min and max were, so 3 and 6, 6 and 12, 3 and 6. And it's going to show me what the new min and max are based on the sales of that SKU for that date range and based on the min and max numbers. Now, again, I don't have a lot of items in here that have any sales. In fact, pretty much the only ones that do are RT14. So down here, you can see it's got the 40 and 60, and it's coming up with a new min and max of 3 and 6. Now, if I wanted to kind of see where those numbers are coming from, I could right-click right on this item, and from there I could go to Display Details, that does bring up that same detail screen that I saw before. From here, I could click the sales button and I could see exactly what my sales were over the past XT number of days or months. Right now, it's analyzing 13 months worth of sales history. I could come in here and change that if I only wanted to see the past 6 months. So you can see I would shorten that amount. If I wanted to see kind of specifically a begin and end date range, basically what I'm seeing here is I've only got 4 sales over the past XD months. So that's why it's coming up with that. Basically, it's taking that time frame there, multiplying the sales, getting the average daily sale, coming up with that new number of 3 and 6. Basically, it's saying that I only really need about 3 to get through a 30-day window and about 6 to get through a 60-day window. That's kind of the idea with that. Excuse me, pardon me. So again, hopefully that makes sense with that. Now, getting back to some of the other questions like Tim had and Jennifer had on seasonal numbers, because you can definitely manipulate where these numbers are coming from and how they're being analyzed based on certain criteria. Let's go ahead and just close out of here. I'm not going to have that save. By the way, actually, before I get into that, that process is something that I just want to talk about that a little bit more. Let's go back into establish, reset, min-max and re-proceed with that. If you are kind of doing this for the first time and you're trying to figure out what those numbers should be back in the inventory subcategory area, it's not starting from these old min-max numbers. It is basically completely ignoring those old min-max numbers and coming up with what the new mins and maxes should be based on your sales history. What I'm meaning with that is that if you come up with some numbers and you don't like what they are, you can go and you can tweak the numbers in the subcategory area, come back and redo this, and it's not going to start from what the old new mins and maxes were and start from there. You can basically come back and kind of go back and forth and then come up and ultimately find what you feel the best number should be for that kind of that ordering period, the number of days of stock for min and max should be for that category and subcategory combination. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, getting back to items, maybe you have some other items that you just want to completely exempt from this process because you want to control those more manually, or maybe it doesn't make sense to reorder them because they're something you produce in-house, or they're a breakdown from a product that you buy more in bulk and you've got a SKU that orders that, or maybe they're special order items. Well, basically back in the change inventory screen, let's go back to that. So we'll go into inventory, add change, and change inventory, and we'll pull up the old RT14. At the location table again, basically you can set what's called a min-max exemption code. This min-max exemption code has these 5 options that you hopefully see here: exempt, new issue, seasonal product, seasonal stock, and special order. Now, exempt, new issue, and special order basically outright just the min-max numbers, they are what they are. They do not change at all, especially the exempt one. The new issue and special order has extra analyzation characteristics that go with that. So if it's a brand new product, you're not sure how it's going to do, you can set it as new issue. You can put in any min and max that you'd like if you would like to. And then you can specially analyze new issue products and ultimately see how they're selling to make the determination of, is this something I'm going to keep in my inventory rotation, or am I going to phase it out, or am I just going to make a special order or something like that. Same thing for the special order. If you flag it as such, you want to keep the mins and maxes 0 when you first key the item in. It will ignore anything in the min-max recalculation process that is flagged as exempt, new issue, and special order. but there is a routine in the inventory management menu known as an analysis of those products. So if we go into inventory management, and we'll see the option here for analyze items with codes. And technically in version 12, we had branched this out so you could analyze anything with any code. But the idea with this normally would be you'd come in and you would analyze products that are special order or new issue. You can see you've got basically check marks here for all of the items. The idea with that is if they have sales within the past X number of days, that's basically what this is saying, include special orders with sales greater than one, greater than anything over the past X number of days, they would go up here. And you would be able to then see a snapshot of how many you sold in the past 6 months by default. And ultimately, if you decide, you know what, these are selling well enough, let's go ahead and throw them into the right rotation. You could right click and remove the code of special order from it so that it would then start to calculate normal mins and maxes based on the sales performance. Same thing with new issue, same thing with any of those options, honestly. The main difference for your seasonal products, however, seasonal stock versus seasonal product. This is kind of the key for Jennifer's and Tim's questions. Some products we sell all year long, but we really sell a huge chunk of them during a certain time of the year. Maybe that's band season, maybe that's hunting season, maybe that's Christmas season, whatever it might be. By setting it as a seasonal stock product, you stock it all year long, you associate it with a season, such as band or Christmas in my system. Those have specific date ranges associated with the season, which you will find set up for in maintenance and inventory and the setup of seasons, setup inventory seasons. Basically, they have a date range associated with them so that when you run the routine in your inventory management module, let's go back to that one more time, and you'll see that there's a program called specifically Establish Min-Max for Seasonal. When you run that for the given season, it'll analyze the sales for that date range from the past year. You could put in an expected seasonal adjustment of any percentage plus or minus. It'll look at the sales of those SKUs that are associated with that season, whether or not they're seasonal stock or seasonal product. It'll calculate how many you sold in that time frame of the prior year, take your percentage adjustment into consideration, and then make a suggestion of how many you should order for the upcoming season. That's the idea with that. If it's seasonal product, then it only orders it for that season. So basically, if it's seasonal stock, they'll still be impacted when you run the normal establish reset min-max. But then heading into that season, when you establish min-max for seasonal, it'll have you order an excess of that inventory to get you stocked for the upcoming season. And then basically, once you've ordered for that season, you would reset the mins and maxes back to normal. So it goes back to what the normal mins and maxes would be outside of the season. So basically, once you sell through that product, then you're back to just your normal ordering of that inventory to keep you stocked throughout the rest of the year. And one other key element with this whole thought process, this whole concept of mins and maxes, is you can establish and reset this min-max as many times as you would like. My recommendation is to do this at least once a month, or more ideally, prior to any time you're getting ready to place a purchase order. Because when you do this regularly, first and foremost, it has an easier time keeping these mins and maxes in check. Second of all, it can keep up with the latest trends of those sales. If sales are gradually declining, then the mins and maxes are only as good as the last time you ran establish reset min-max. So by constantly rerunning this, you can have it come up with the new average daily number, and it'll ultimately start reducing those items if the sales are starting to wane. Likewise, if the sales are increasing, then you can have it keep up with those increases in sales, and it can start to see that the average daily sales is going up, and then it will have you reorder more. So that's kind of the idea with that. Now, this is 100% reactive, so I just want to make that very clear. There are things that you can do, such as the inventory reorder report, which does take these mins and maxes into consideration, but it also by default shows you 13 months of sales history. So it's very easy on that report to go back and see if you had a normal spike, maybe a certain time of year, and you could technically tweak the numbers at any given point to reorder more or less based on what you feel is the final call. But that is basically the concept of these mins and maxes numbers with this algorithm to have it recalculate this on a regular basis so that you can spend your inventory dollars more wisely. So hopefully that makes sense as far as inventory min and max basics. I've done a number of other webinars on these concepts that are all available in our member portal, so feel free to check those out. I'm certainly open to doing even more webinars on inventory management throughout the coming weeks and months if there's a demand for it. Basically, just let me know any particular topics you'd like to see me cover. Feel free to give me an email to training@tritechretail.com. Give me a call at 800-670-1736. Ask for me, and I'll be more than happy to take your call and get some ideas. We do have 2 more webinars coming up next week on daily balancing routines and bank reconciliation functions, kind of more of an accounting basis so that respect. So if you have any bookkeepers in your staff that you like to make sure are using the system to its fullest, definitely have them sign up for that. And I will be announcing more webinars for the rest of April and into May. So stay tuned to keep an eye out on our member portal or on your inbox. I'm sure that as soon as I have the webinar schedule finalized, our marketing department will want to get that email out as quick as possible so that you have more time to consider and sign up. Let's just make sure we get the rest of these questions answered that are coming in. Let me see where I left off here. Tim had asked about the seasonal sales. Again, hopefully that all makes sense. Brandy asks, is there a way to let the system automatically adjust based on the seasons, or does it always have to be manually changed? As of right now, it is something that it basically would have to be manually run. Basically, it's not an automatic function to go in and automatically run seasonal versus reset min max. Let me just check something here offhand. And I was looking at this when I did the Setup Tasks webinar a few weeks ago, but just to see if there is a function here for min and max recalculation as part of the automated tasks functions. And I'm not seeing anything like that in here. I believe that is something that we are looking into as far as possibly having an automatable task for min and max functions as well as seasonal. There's some considerations that have to be made for that. We'll definitely keep you posted if there's going to be a way to have those things be automated using this tasks function. So thank you so much, Brandy, for the question. Tim is asking, do you use the season date time from the normal min-max settings for the rest of the year? And Tim, I'm not quite sure I follow the question. Do you remove the season date time from the normal min-max settings? Basically, the established reset min-max is kind of basically just looking at normal sales outside of the season. So established reset min-max for seasonal is looking specifically at that seasonal range for any products that are set as seasonal and associated with that season. And then seasonal stock items are just kind of looking at everything else. So when you establish reset min-max, it brings it back down to kind of normal stock sales outside of that season. I believe that's what you're asking. You don't really have to remove anything manually. It kind of does that on its own just based on how it's programmed to run. So hopefully that answers the question there, Tim. If not, let me know, and I will do my best to try and answer that based on an addendum to the question. By the way, thank you so much for everyone attending and participating in these webinars. Response has been phenomenal. We really appreciate you um, letting us help you, basically, because we're all kind of in this crazy normal 2.0 together. So I just want to take a moment and extend my sincere thank you to sticking with us and letting us be here to help you make adaptations to this changing retail landscape. I know a lot of our clients here that use AIM are shifting to doing things like curbside pickup and reducing, obviously, the number of people that can be in the showroom, assuming the showroom can be open at all. A lot of folks are taking advantage of our integrated e-commerce functions or looking into those now if they haven't already done so. So lots of different things that you can do to try and stay proactive and keep some business coming in, because people, they still want to spend money. Hopefully they have some money coming in on their own in some way, shape, or form. But people, they still want to live their lives. And a lot of times living that life still revolves around going to their local businesses and spending what they want to spend that money on. So we just appreciate you letting us be here and letting us be your software solution for helping to not only keep your business maintained, but ultimately to grow and thrive. So let me just see if we got any other questions coming in. Tim is saying, thoughts on having or converting from version 11 to version 12, or the setup of it. Sure, I could definitely do another webinar on that, Tim. There isn't much that's changed really from that, but I could certainly do a new one on that and explore basically our thought process to get a successful conversion. Brandy is saying a webinar on how to use the service request for our gunsmithing to create invoices and take deposits would be great. Let me get back to you on that, Brandy, because I just want to make sure I understand kind of specifically what you're looking for with that. So I've got your contact info. I will follow up with you later on and just make sure I know specifically kind of what you're looking for there. But yeah, do a webinar on basically anything that we can help you make use of the system with. So definitely. All right. Well, let's see. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. It looks like folks are kind of filtering out and checking out of the webinar. There is one other question. So let me make sure I answer that. If you do need to get going, definitely feel free to close out of the webinar. The whole thing is recorded. We can get you the access to the recording right through the member portal where all the other webinars are. But there's a question coming in from Allison, or rather a request on a webinar. She says she's looking into using the inventory export and import routine to clean some things up. So a training on that would be good. So yeah, definitely. I can definitely do a webinar on the inventory import export utility. That's an excellent idea. Thank you so much, Allison. I will put that on the agenda for the upcoming season here, as it were. All right. Yeah, it looks like a lot of folks are cycling out now. So let's go ahead, close out here. If I didn't get to your question, or if you didn't have a chance to ask it and you come up with it later, definitely shoot me an email at that training@tritechretail.com. Again, thank you so much for attending, and I hope you're able to make it a great day. Take care.